My parents actually chuckled when I walked into the conference room, wearing that specific smile that said they thought I was there to beg for crumbs. I said nothing. I simply placed the thick red folder on the mahogany table and slid it toward the lawyer. Mr. Calder went pale as a sheet. He slammed the estate file shut and whispered that he needed to call the court immediately. My name is Lydia Russell, and I have always been invisible to the people who made me, right up until the moment I became a threat. The reception area of Calder and Wren was designed to intimidate. It was all polished marble and dark wood, smelling of old paper and money that had been scrubbed clean. The office was located on the 42nd floor of the tallest building in Crestwick, a city where height equaled morality. If you were up here, you were closer to God, or at least you could look down on everyone else. I sat in a leather chair that cost more than my first car, my hands folded in my lap. I checked my watch. It was 8:58 in the morning. 2 minutes to go. I was not nervous. I had been nervous for 20 years. I had been nervous when I asked for lunch money. I had been nervous when I asked for a signature on a college application. I had been nervous every time the phone rang and I saw their number. But fear is a currency, and I had simply run out of it to pay them. When the heavy oak double doors opened, a paralegal with a tight bun and tired eyes nodded at me. Miss Russell, they are ready for you. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my charcoal gray blazer. I picked up my bag. Inside that bag was a single item that mattered. I walked into the conference room. It was vast, dominated by a table long enough to land a small aircraft on. At the far end sat Miles Calder, the senior partner. He was a man in his 60s who wore three-piece suits and had the kind of silver hair that inspired trust in widows. And sitting to his right were my parents, Gordon and Elaine Russell. They looked impeccable. My father was wearing his Navy Club blazer, the one with the brass buttons. My mother was in a cream silk blouse that made her look fragile and aristocratic. They were holding hands on top of the table, a united front, a portrait of grieving piety. When I stepped fully into the room, the performance broke. Just for a second, Gordon looked up. His eyes scanned me from my sensible shoes to my pulled-back hair. Then he looked at Elaine, and then it happened. The laugh. It was not a loud, boisterous laugh. It was worse. It was a huff of air through the nose, a small, vibrating chuckle that shook his shoulders. It was the sound you make when a dog walks into a formal dinner party. It was the sound of amusement mixed with absolute dismissal. Lydia, my father said, a smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. We didn't think you would actually bother. My mother covered her mouth with a tissue, but I saw her eyes. They were crinkled at the edges. She was smiling behind that tissue. Oh, honey, she said, her voice dripping with that sugary poison she had perfected over 3 decades. This is a legal proceeding. It is for family and beneficiaries. You didn't need to take time off work. We could have sent you a memento later. Maybe one of Mother's old scarves. They thought I was there to beg. They thought I was the prodigal daughter returning for a scrap of the estate. They were so confident. They had spent the last 10 years charming my grandmother, Estelle, or so they thought. They had spent the last 6 months hovering over her deathbed like vultures waiting for a pulse to stop. They knew the numbers. They had probably already spent the money in their heads. A new boat for Gordon, a sunroom extension for Elaine. I did not say a word. I pulled out the chair opposite them. The distance between us was about 8 feet of polished mahogany, but it felt like a canyon. Miles Calder cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. He was a man who preferred quick resolutions and billable hours, not family awkwardness. Mr. and Mrs. Russell, Lydia, let us begin. As you know, we are here to read the last will and testament of Estelle Marie Russell. He placed a thick document on the table in front of him. It was bound in blue paper, the standard will, the one my parents knew about, the one they had likely helped draft, hovering over my grandmother's shoulder, guiding her trembling hand. My mother was very clear about her wishes, Gordon said, leaning back, his confidence radiating off him like heat. She wanted to keep the assets within the primary household, to ensure the legacy is managed by those with experience. Experience, I said. It was the first word I had spoken. My voice was steady, It did not shake. Gordon's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." "Nothing," I said. "Please, Mr. Calder, proceed." Calder adjusted his glasses. "Yes, well, I have the document dated October 14th, 2 years ago. It names Gordon and Elaine Russell as the primary executors and sole beneficiaries of the estate, including the property at 400 Harrow Lane and the entirety of the investment accounts held at—" My parents squeezed each other's hands. They were practically vibrating. This was it. The payday, the validation, the erasure of me. I moved. I reached into my bag. I did not rush. I moved with the slow, deliberate precision of a bomb disposal technician. I pulled out the folder. It was not a standard manila folder. It was red, a deep, dark, blood red, and it was thick, about 2 inches thick, but the color was not the most important part. The most important part was the seal. Across the opening of the folder was a thick strip of tamper-evident tape, stamped with a specific logo. It was a logo of a scale balancing a sword. It was the old, original seal of Calder and Wren, a seal they only used for internal, high-security sensitive documents, the kind of documents that never leave the vault. And right in the center, in my grandmother's shaky but distinct handwriting, were the words, "For Miles Calder's eyes only." I placed the folder on the table. Thud. The sound was heavy. It echoed in the quiet room. I placed 2 fingers on top of the red folder and slid it across the mahogany. It made a dry rasping sound as it traveled over the expensive wood. It stopped exactly 6 inches from Miles Calder's hands. Gordon and Elaine were still smiling, but the smile had frozen. It was stuck on their faces, like a mask that had suddenly become too tight. They looked at the folder, then they looked at me, then they looked at the lawyer. Miles Calder looked down. He saw the red cardstock. He saw the tape. He saw the logo. The color drained from his face so fast, it was like someone had pulled a plug in his heels. He went gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hand, which had been holding a gold fountain pen, went limp. Clack! The pen hit the table and rolled, coming to a stop against the edge of the blue will document. The silence in the room changed. A moment ago, it had been the silence of anticipation. Now, it was the silence of a heart attack. Calder stared at that folder as if it were a radioactive isotope. He did not touch it. He just stared at the seal. I saw a bead of sweat pop out on his temple, right at the hairline. "Where did you get this?" Calder whispered. His voice was a rasp. He cleared his throat and tried again. Louder, but it cracked. "Miss Russell, who gave you this file?" He was looking at me, but he wasn't seeing me. He was seeing a ghost. He was seeing a catastrophe. He was seeing the end of his career. "My grandmother," I said. My voice was calm. I was the only person in the room with a normal heart rate. "She gave it to me 3 days before she passed. She gave me very specific instructions." Gordon made a noise. It was a scoff, but it sounded wet and choked. "That is ridiculous. Mother was bedridden. She couldn't lift a spoon, let alone organize a secret file. This is a prop, a fake." I ignored him. I kept my eyes on the lawyer. She said, and I quote, "Do not open it. Do not let anyone else touch it. Just give it straight to Mr. Calder. He will know what the red tape means." Calder swallowed. I saw his Adam's apple bob up and down violently. He knew what the tape meant. I didn't, not entirely, but I knew it terrified him. "This is impossible," Calder muttered. He reached out a shaking hand toward the folder. "This file shouldn't exist. The protocol for a red seal is—" He stopped himself. He looked up at my parents. His eyes were wide, filled with a sudden, dawning horror. Gordon sensed the shift. He sensed that the boat he was planning to buy was sailing away. He stood up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Let me see that," Gordon barked. He lunged across the table. "It is a forgery. She is lying. She has always been a liar." His hand grabbed the corner of the red folder. "Do not touch it," Calder screamed. It was not a professional lawyer voice. It was a shriek of panic, But Gordon didn't listen. He yanked the folder. I didn't move. I didn't have to. The door behind us burst open. 2 uniformed security guards stepped in. They had been waiting. Calder must have hit a silent panic button under the desk the moment he saw the seal. Or perhaps the firm's protocol for that specific file required immediate containment. "Sir, step away from the table," the lead guard said. He was a large man who looked like he bent steel bars for recreation. Gordon froze. His hand was still on the folder. He looked at the guard, then at me. His face turned a mottled purple. "I am Gordon Russell. I am the executor of this estate. I have a right to see every document on this table." "Not that one," Calder said. His voice was shaking, but it was firm. He stood up, snatching the folder back from Gordon's grip and pulling it close to his chest. He held it like it was a holy relic or a loaded gun. "You do not have the clearance to see this. Mr. Russell, nobody does. Not yet." Gordon slumped back into his chair. He looked defeated, but mostly he looked confused. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the bewildered anger of a man who realizes the rules of the game have changed without his permission. Elaine was trembling. She reached for Gordon's arm, her fingernails digging into his blazer. She looked at the red folder, then at the lawyer's pale face. She was smarter than my father. She realized faster that something terrible was happening. Calder took a deep breath. He picked up the blue will, the one they thought was the only one, and closed it. He stacked it on top of the other papers. "I am suspending this reading," Calder announced. "You can't do that," Gordon sputtered. "We are here. Read the damn will." "I cannot proceed," Calder said. He looked sick. "Given the introduction of this evidence and the specific nature of the seal, I am legally and ethically bound to halt all proceedings regarding the Russell estate immediately." He looked at me. There was no kindness in his eyes, only fear. "I need to call the probate court, and I need to call the firm's ethics committee." "Ethics?" Elaine squeaked. "Why would you need an ethics committee?" Calder didn't answer her. He walked to the door. He paused, turning to the security guards. "Stay in this room. Watch them. Make sure nothing leaves this table." Then he looked at me one last time. "You have no idea what you have just done, do you?" "I did what I was told," I said simply. Calder exited the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. We could hear him in the hallway, barking orders at his assistant to get Judge Halloway on the line, immediately. The silence returned, but now it was heavy and suffocating. My mother turned to me. The tears started. They were instant, summoned on command like rain from a cloud-seeding plain. She reached across the table, her hand, manicured and soft, because she had never done a day of manual labor in her life, reached for mine. I pulled my hand back. "Lydia," she sobbed. "Lydia, honey, what is this? What is in that folder? Why are you doing this to us?" "I didn't do anything," I said. "Grandma did. We are family," she pleaded. Her voice dropped to a whisper, intended to sound intimate, but it just sounded desperate. "Your father and I have bills. Lydia, the house needs repairs. We were counting on this. We have debts." "I know," I said. "I know about the debts." Her eyes widened. The tears stopped for a microsecond, then resumed. "You are trying to hurt us. You have always been so jealous that we stayed with her, that we took care of her while you were off in the city playing with your spreadsheets." "Took care of her," I repeated flatly. "We were there every day," Gordon shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The security guard stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. Gordon flinched and lowered his voice. "We were there. You were gone. You have no right to sabotage this family." "I am not sabotaging anything," I said. I looked at the spot where the red folder had been. "I am just balancing the books." Elaine wiped her face. The mask of sadness was slipping, revealing the venom underneath. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we gave you, a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and a bill for every single item," I said. "I still have the receipts. Mom, do you—" She recoiled, as if I had slapped her. We sat there for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of Gordon staring at the wall, his jaw clenching and unclenching, 10 minutes of Elaine weeping softly, occasionally shooting daggers at me with her eyes. 10 minutes of the security guards watching us like we were inmates in a high-security holding cell. I just watched the clock. 9:25. Then the door opened. Miles Calder walked back in. He looked different. He looked like he had aged 5 years in 10 minutes. His tie was slightly crooked. He was no longer the master of the universe. He was a man who had just looked into the abyss. He walked to the head of the table. He did not sit down. He placed both hands on the mahogany surface and leaned forward. "I have spoken to Judge Holloway," Calder said. His voice was ice cold. It was devoid of any client service warmth. "And I have initiated a mandatory freeze on all assets connected to Estelle Russell, Gordon Russell, and Elaine Russell." "What?" Gordon stood up again. "Why my assets? This is about my mother's will." Calder ignored him. He looked straight at my parents, then at me. "The contents of that folder," Calder said, speaking very slowly, "contain allegations and documented proof of actions that go far beyond a civil dispute." He looked at the security guards. "Escort Mr. and Mrs. Russell to their vehicles. They are to leave the premises immediately." "This is an outrage," Gordon shouted. "I will sue you. I will sue this entire firm." Calder finally smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a grim, terrifying smile. "Mr. Russell, based on what I just read, you are going to need that retainer for a criminal defense attorney, not a civil suit." Gordon stopped shouting. His mouth hung open. Elaine grabbed her purse. She looked at me, her eyes wide with true, unfiltered panic. "Lydia, what was in there? Tell me." I said nothing. I just watched them. Calder turned his gaze to the rest of the room. He looked at the papers scattered on the table. "I want to make one thing very clear," the lawyer said. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating with a threat that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Nobody leaves this room with so much as a paperclip. The office is now on lockdown." He looked directly at my father. "Because if anyone," Calder said, "attempts to remove, delete, or alter any document from this point forward, it will not just be considered a violation of probate law, it will be considered destruction of evidence in a federal investigation." My parents stopped breathing. The air left the room. I sat back in my expensive leather chair. I looked at my father's pale face. I looked at my mother's trembling hands. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel like the one who owed a debt. I felt like the one who had come to collect. To understand why a daughter would hand a lawyer a folder capable of destroying her parents, you have to understand the economy of the house on 4th Street in Harrow Glen. Most families run on love, or obligation, or at least a shared sense of survival. The Russell household ran on a ledger. It was an invisible, unspoken balance sheet that my parents updated every single hour of every single day. I was not a child to them. I was an investment, and a poorly performing one at that, incurring maintenance costs that they resented with every breath. The house in Harrow Glen was narrow, covered in beige vinyl siding that seemed to absorb the gloom of the overcast sky. Inside, the air was always heavy. It smelled of stale coffee and silent calculations. I learned to walk softly on the linoleum floors, not because I was afraid of waking them, but because making noise drew attention, and attention usually came with a price tag. If I left a light on in the bathroom for more than 3 minutes, my father, Gordon, would be waiting in the hallway. He would not yell. Yelling would have been passion, and Gordon Russell did not waste passion. He would simply sigh, a long, deflating sound through his nose, and look at the ceiling as if calculating the kilowatt hours I had just stolen from his retirement. "Do you think the electric company takes IOUs?" "Lydia," he would ask, "because I cannot pay them with your good intentions." My mother, Elaine, specialized in the guilt of sustenance. Dinner was never just a meal. It was a sacrifice she had made, a martyrdom served on a chipped ceramic plate. If I asked for a second helping of mashed potatoes, she would pause, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth. She would look at the pot, then at my father, then back to me with a tragic, tight-lipped smile. "Of course, honey," she would say. "You go ahead. I can just have a little less. Growing girls need it more than I do, I suppose. She would then proceed to eat nothing but a single slice of bread, sipping her water while watching me chew, making sure I swallowed the guilt along with the starch. Every calorie I consumed was a debt. Every new pair of sneakers for gym class was a loan against my future obedience. By the time I was 10 years old, I felt like I was living in a deficit I could never repay. I learned to make myself small. I learned to need nothing. If I didn't need anything, they couldn't invoice me for it. The only place I could breathe was 3 miles away, in a small, cedar-shingled cottage at the edge of town. My grandmother, Estelle Russell, lived in a house that smelled of pine shavings, dried peppermint, and freedom. There were no invisible ledgers there. When I walked through her front door, the knot in my stomach, a knot that tightened the moment I entered my parents' house, would finally unravel. Estelle was not a soft, cookie-baking grandmother. She was made of grit and wire. She had hands that were rough like sandpaper, stained with wood stain and garden soil. She didn't offer me pity. She offered me tools. I remember one Saturday when I was 12. I had come over crying because Gordon had lectured me for 20 minutes about the cost of the hot water I had used for a shower. I felt like a parasite. Estelle didn't hug me. She put a Phillips head screwdriver in my hand and pointed to a wobbly shelf in her pantry. "Fix it," she said. "I don't know how," I sniffled. "Then figure it out," she snapped. But her eyes were kind. "Tears don't tighten screws. Lydia, competence does. When you know how to fix your own house, nobody can tell you what it costs to live in it." That afternoon, she taught me how to find a stud in the wall. She taught me the difference between a wood screw and a sheet metal screw. She taught me that things broke, and that they could be mended without guilt. "Money," Estelle told me later, as we drank herbal tea on her porch, watching the rain hit the roof, "is a tool, like a hammer. You use it to build your life, but your parents, they use it like a leash. Never let anyone hold the other end of the leash. Lydia, not a man, not a bank, and certainly not your family." She took a small notebook out of her apron pocket. It was tattered, filled with rows of neat numbers written in pencil. "I write down every penny I spend," she said, tapping the page. "Not because I'm cheap, but because when I see the numbers, I know exactly where I stand. The numbers don't lie to you. People lie. Numbers just are. If you control the numbers, you control your freedom." I took that lesson into my bones. I fell in love with the clarity of mathematics. In a world where my mother's love was conditional and my father's approval was transactional, numbers were safe. 2 plus 2 was always 4. It never asked for a thank you note. It never sighed when you wrote it down. I grew up. I moved out the day I turned 18, taking 3 jobs to pay for a studio apartment the size of a closet, just so I wouldn't have to hear Gordon ask who was paying for the toast. I put myself through college, eating ramen and working night shifts, refusing every offer of help from them because I knew the interest rates on their assistance were lethal. I became a risk analyst. It was the perfect job for a girl raised in a minefield. At Redwood LedgerWorks, my job was to look at massive sets of data for corporate clients and predict where things would go wrong. I looked for weak points. I looked for structural instabilities. I looked for the patterns that preceded a collapse. I was good at it. I was promoted 3 times in 5 years. I bought a sensible car. I bought a condo. I built a life that was watertight, with a savings account that acted as a fortress around my peace of mind. And that was when my parents suddenly decided they were proud of me. Or rather, they decided I was solvent. The shift was subtle at first. A phone call here and there, bragging to their friends about my title. Our daughter, the senior analyst, they wore my success like a badge of honor they hadn't earned, but in private, the dynamic pivoted. They stopped treating me like a debtor and started treating me like a line of credit. It started with small things. "Lydia, honey," my mother would say over the phone, her voice tight with manufactured stress. "The transmission on the Buick is acting up. The mechanic wants $1,200. Your father is just beside himself. We don't want to dip into the emergency fund just yet. Could you float us until the 1st of the month?" I sent the check. I told myself it was duty. I told myself that despite the coldness, they were my parents. Then it was a request to co-sign on a timeshare they couldn't afford. It is an investment, Lydia. We can all use it, Gordon argued, his voice booming with that salesman confidence he used to mask his incompetence. We just need your credit score to get the prime rate. It is just a signature. I refused that one. Gordon didn't speak to me for 3 months. When he finally did, it was to ask if I could pay for the new water heater because I used all that hot water growing up. I was sitting in Estelle's kitchen one Sunday, venting about this. I was 30 years old, successful, independent, and yet I still felt that crushing weight of obligation every time my phone buzzed with their ringtone. Estelle was older now. Her hands shook a little when she held her teacup, and her movements were slower, but her mind was as sharp as a diamond cutter. She listened to me talk about the latest loan request, $2,000 for a roof repair that I was pretty sure was cosmetic. Stop it, Estelle said. She set her cup down hard. I blinked. Stop what helping them? Stop acting like you owe them back pay for your childhood, she said. Her voice was fierce. You are not an investment vehicle, Lydia. You are not a pension fund. You do not owe them for the food they fed you or the roof they kept over your head. That is what the law requires of parents. You don't get a medal for doing the bare minimum, and you certainly don't get to send an invoice for it 30 years later. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was dry and paper thin. They are holes. Lydia, she whispered. Gordon and Elaine, they are empty buckets. You can pour everything you have into them, your money, your love, your sanity, and they will never be full. They will just drain you until you are as dry as they are. I looked at her, and I wanted to cry, because I knew she was right. But knowing it and acting on it were two different things. I just don't want them to struggle, I said weakly. They are not struggling, Estelle corrected. They are managing badly, and they want you to cushion their fall. Then came the decline. It happened fast. Estelle fell in her garden, a broken hip, then pneumonia, then a series of complications that saw her moved from her beloved cottage to a private room in the palliative care wing of St. Jude's Hospital. That was when the behavior of Gordon and Elaine changed in a way that set every alarm bell in my risk analyst brain ringing. For years, they had visited Estelle sporadically at best, maybe once a month, maybe a phone call on holidays. They found her wood-scented house drafty and her lectures on frugality tiresome. Gordon often complained that his mother was sitting on a gold mine with that property, but was too stubborn to leverage it. But the moment the doctors used the word hospice, my parents transformed. They became the model children. They were at the hospital every day at 9 a.m. sharp. They brought casseroles for the nurses. They brought fresh flowers. They sat by her bedside, holding her hand, reading to her from magazines she didn't like. My mother brushed Estelle's hair with a tenderness that looked performative, like an actor hitting her marks for the camera. Oh, Mother looks so peaceful today, Elaine would coo to the nurses. We just want to make sure she's comfortable. That is all that matters. Gordon was suddenly deeply interested in the administrative side of things. He was always in the hallway, talking to the doctors, asking about timelines, not, how is she feeling, but, how long do we have? To an outsider, it looked like devotion. It looked like a family rallying around their matriarch in her final days. But I sat in the corner of that hospital room with my laptop open, pretending to work, and I watched them. I watched them with the same cold, detached eye I used to analyze failing market trends. I saw the way Gordon's eyes didn't look at his mother's face, but darted around the room, assessing the equipment, looking at her personal effects. I saw the way Elaine would check her watch every 15 minutes, her mask of sorrow slipping just enough to reveal the boredom underneath. They were too sweet, too present, too perfectly timed. In my line of work, we call this a variance. When data points suddenly shift without a clear external cause, it usually indicates manipulation. When a company that has been losing money for years suddenly reports record profits right before a merger. You don't celebrate. You dig. You look for the fraud. My parents were the failing company, and Estelle was the merger. One afternoon, I walked in and found Gordon leaning over the bed. Estelle was asleep, her breathing raspy and shallow. Gordon was holding her purse. He wasn't opening it, just holding it, weighing it in his hands. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. Gordon jumped. He actually jumped, dropping the purse back onto the side table. He spun around, a flash of genuine anger in his eyes before he smoothed it over with a grieving son's smile. "Just moving it," he stammered. "It was cluttering the table. I wanted to make room for her water." The table was empty. I walked over and picked up the purse. I put it inside my own tote bag. "I will take care of her things." "Dad," I said. "There is no need for that," he said quickly, too quickly. "Your mother and I are handling the estate and the logistics. We don't want to burden you. You have your big important job." "It is no burden," I said. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just greed. Greed is passive. This was active. This was a campaign. The sweetness was not the smell of love. It was the smell of rot, masked by air freshener. It was the scent of a predator that knows the prey is wounded and can no longer run. They weren't there to comfort her. They were there to secure the asset. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wall, thinking about ledgers. I thought about the invisible invoices of my childhood. I thought about the $2,000 for the roof. I thought about the way Gordon had looked at that purse. My grandmother had taught me that numbers don't lie. And as I replayed the last 3 weeks in my head, the equation was becoming terrifyingly clear. My parents weren't waiting for an inheritance. They were running a transaction. And I had a sickening feeling that the transaction had started long before Estelle's heart began to fail. I needed data. I needed proof. The next day, I didn't go to work. I went back to the hospital, waiting for the narrow window of time when I knew Gordon and Elaine would be at lunch. I needed to talk to Estelle. I needed to know if she saw it too, or if the drugs had clouded the sharpest mind I had ever known. But when I got there, she was already awake, and she was looking at the door, her eyes clear, fierce, and terrified. "Check the books," she whispered the moment I stepped close. "Lydia, check the books." "Check the books," she had whispered. It was a command that overrode 20 years of daughterly submission. I did not go back to my office at Redwood Ledger Works that afternoon. Instead, I drove to my grandmother's empty house, the key feeling heavy and unauthorized in my pocket. My parents were still at the hospital, performing their vigil of concern, which gave me a window of approximately 3 hours. I sat at Estelle's small oak desk in the corner of her living room. The house was cold. Without her presence, the smell of pine and peppermint had turned stale. I booted up her ancient desktop computer. It hummed and groaned, a relic from a different era. But Estelle was meticulous. She had online banking. She had passwords written in a cipher that only she and I understood, a combination of her favorite Bible verses and the years her dogs had died. I logged in. In my line of work, we look for patterns. Fraud is rarely a single, catastrophic explosion. It is usually a leak. It is a drip, drip, drip of assets moving from where they belong to where they do not. I pulled up the checking account first. At a glance, it looked normal. Utility bills paid, the property tax auto draft, the subscription for her gardening magazine. But then I scrolled back 6 months, to the timeline coinciding with the start of her physical decline. There it was, November 3rd, debit, $850, recipient Russell Home Solutions, LLC. I frowned. I had never heard of Russell Home Solutions. I scrolled down. November 17th, debit, $850, recipient Russell Home Solutions, LLC. December 1st, debit, $1,200, recipient Russell Home Solutions, LLC. The pattern was rhythmic, bi-weekly withdrawals. The amounts were escalating. By February, the withdrawals were hitting $2,000 a pop. I pulled up the transaction details. There were no invoice numbers, no reference codes, just a direct transfer authorized by a signature on file. I opened a new tab and navigated to the Secretary of State's business registry. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I typed in Russell Home Solutions. The search result loaded in less than a second. Entity name, Russell Home Solutions. LLC. Filing date, October 22nd. Registered agent Gordon Russell. Mailing address, 1242 Maple Street. My parents' house. I sat back in the creaky wooden chair. The breath knocked out of me. My father had registered a limited liability company less than 2 weeks before the withdrawal started. He had named it to sound like a legitimate contractor, a service provider. I looked around the living room. I walked into the kitchen. I checked the bathroom. There were no new handrails. The leaky faucet in the guest sink was still dripping. The back porch step, which had been rotting for 2 years, was still soft and dangerous under my boot. There had been no solutions provided to this home. There had been no repairs. There had been no maintenance. There was only extraction. I did the math in my head. Tallying the withdrawals over the last 6 months, it totaled nearly $28,000. That was not a small leak. That was a hemorrhage. I heard a car door slam outside. I froze. I quickly cleared the browser history, shut down the computer, and moved to the armchair by the window. Opening a book I had grabbed from the shelf. The front door opened. It was Gordon. He was alone. "Lydia." He seemed startled to see me. "What are you doing here? I thought you were working." "I took the afternoon off," I said, keeping my voice level. "I wanted to water her plants. They looked dry." Gordon nodded, but his eyes darted to the desk in the corner. He scanned it, checking to see if papers had been moved. "That is nice of you. Your mother is still at the hospital. I just came by to check on the mail." "The mail?" I asked. "I can get it." "No," he snapped, then forced a laugh. No, I am already here. I handle the administrative side. You know, it is complicated stuff. Insurance forms, Medicare, boring things." He walked to the hallway table where the mail had been dropped through the slot. He scooped up the pile with a frantic energy. I watched him. I saw him shuffle through the envelopes. He paused on a white one with the bank's logo in the corner. He slipped it quickly into the inside pocket of his blazer. "Dad," I said, "I noticed the back porch step is still broken." He froze. "What?" "The step," I said. "It is dangerous. I thought you guys were handling repairs. Grandma mentioned she was paying for some work." Gordon turned slowly. His face was composed, but his neck was red. We are getting quotes. Good work takes time. Lydia, you can't just hire the first handyman in the phone book. We have a company lined up. They are very exclusive." "What is the company called?" I asked. "It is a specialist group." He waved his hand dismissively. "You wouldn't know them. Look, I have to get back to your mother. Don't stay long. We need to conserve the heat." He left. He took the bank statement with him. I waited until his car turned the corner. Then I got back to work. But I didn't go back to the computer. I went to the trash can in the kitchen. My mother, Elaine, was meticulous about hygiene but lazy about espionage. She opened mail that wasn't hers, but she didn't shred it. She just buried it. I dug through the coffee grounds and eggshells. Near the bottom, I found a crumpled envelope from the week before. It was a bank notice. It had been ripped open, not with a letter opener, but with a finger, jagged and hasty. Inside was a notice of insufficient funds for the checking account. They were draining it faster than her pension could replenish it, and to cover the gap, they were transferring money from her savings. I took a picture of the torn envelope lying amongst the garbage. I took a picture of the date stamp. I pulled out a small notebook from my bag, my own ledger, and I wrote it down. Date March 12th. Item bank notice found in trash. Condition opened by third party. Content overdraft warning. For the next week, I became a ghost in my own family. I played the part of the tired, grieving granddaughter. I brought coffee to the hospital. I sat quietly in the corner, but my eyes were recording everything. I noticed how Elaine would intercept the nurses whenever they brought paperwork. "Oh, give that to me. She's resting," she would say, tucking clipboard forms into her oversized purse. I noticed how they told the neighbors, Mrs. Gable and old Mr. Henderson, that Estelle was losing her mind. It is so sad. I heard Elaine telling Mrs. Gable in the hospital cafeteria line. She doesn't know what day it is. She thinks she has millions of dollars buried in the yard. We just have to nod and smile. The dementia is aggressive. I knew for a fact Estelle had scored 28 out of 30 on her cognitive assessment the day before. She wasn't forgetting. She was trapped. But the smoking gun didn't come from a document. It came from a phone. It was a Tuesday evening. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop off some laundry I had done for Estelle. The house was quiet. I walked into the kitchen and saw the wall-mounted landline phone. The receiver was off the hook, resting on the counter. I picked it up to hang it up. I am telling you, the notary is expensive, Gordon, but he is willing to backdate it. I froze. The voice was coming from the extension in the master bedroom upstairs. My mother. I don't care what it costs, my father's voice replied, sounding tinny and distorted. Just get him here. If she passes before we get the power of attorney modified, we are stuck with the old will, and the old will puts everything in the trust. She is fighting it, Elaine said. She wouldn't hold the pen yesterday. She claimed her hand hurt. Then guide her hand. Elaine, Gordon hissed. It is for her own good. We are the ones who know how to manage the assets. Lydia would just donate it to a cat shelter or something stupid. We have to secure the legacy. Okay, Elaine sighed. I will try again tomorrow. I will tell her it is a medical release form. She usually signs those without reading. I gently placed the receiver back on the counter. My hands were shaking, not with fear, with a cold, hard rage. They weren't just stealing, they were planning to rewrite reality. They were going to trick a dying woman into signing away her autonomy under the guise of medical necessity. I drove straight to the hospital. It was late, past visiting hours, but the night nurse knew me. She let me in. Estelle was awake. She looked small in the hospital bed. Her silver hair spread out on the pillow like a halo of static. She saw my face and she knew. You checked the books, she said. It wasn't a question. I checked them, I said. I pulled a chair close to the bed. Grandma, they are stealing from you. They have an LLC. They are transferring money every 2 weeks, and I heard them. They are going to try to make you sign a new power of attorney. They want to change the will. Estelle closed her eyes. A single tear leaked out, tracking through the map of wrinkles on her cheek. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. My own son, she whispered. I raised him to be better, but greed is a weed. Lydia, you can't pull it out once it takes root. She opened her eyes. They were suddenly sharp, burning with the last reserves of her strength. Lock the door, she said. I got up and turned the lock on the hospital room door. Under the mattress, she commanded. By my feet. Dig deep. I reached under the heavy hospital mattress. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled it out. It was a small, flat lockbox, not much bigger than a hardcover book. The key is in my denture cup, she said. I fished a tiny brass key out of the dry plastic cup on the nightstand. I unlocked the box. Inside, there was a single object, a red folder, thick, heavy. Sealed with a tape I recognized immediately. It was the tamper-evident tape used by Calder and Wren, the most prestigious law firm in the county, the firm my grandfather had used 50 years ago. I prepared this 6 months ago, Estelle said, her voice gaining strength. When the first withdrawal happened, I knew. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. I went to see Miles Calder. I told him everything. I gave him the initial proofs. Why didn't you stop them? I asked, my voice cracking. Why didn't you call the police? Because they are my blood, she said sadly, and because I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to know if there was any redemption left in them. If they stopped, if they confessed, I would have burned this folder. She reached out and placed her hand on the red cardstock. They didn't stop, she said. They accelerated. She pushed the folder toward me. Take this. Do not open it. The seal is important. If the seal is broken, the chain of custody is compromised. Miles Calder explained it to me. It has to be you. Lydia, you have to be the courier. "What is in it?" I asked. "The truth," she said, "and the consequences." She gripped my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong, a final surge of adrenaline. "Listen to me, Lydia. They are going to have a reading. After I'm gone, they will be there. They will be dressed in their best clothes. They will cry. And when they see you, they will laugh." I stared at her. "Why would they laugh?" "Because they think they have won," Estelle said. A small, dry smile touched her lips. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a woman who had played the long game. "They think they have drained the accounts. They think they have tricked the old lady. They will look at you, and they will see a victim. They will laugh because they think you are there to ask for scraps." She squeezed my wrist harder. "Let them laugh," she hissed. "Let them gloat. Let them think they are kings of the world for 5 minutes. And then you put this on the table." "And then what?" I whispered. Estelle lay back against the pillows. The energy was fading, leaving her gray and frail. "If they laugh at you in that room," she said softly, her eyes drifting toward the ceiling, "it just means they don't know what they are about to lose. They think they are fighting for money, Lydia. But in this folder they are fighting for their freedom." She closed her eyes. "Hide it," she breathed. "They will be here in the morning with the papers to sign. I need to rest. I need to be ready to act confused." I put the red folder in my bag. I buried it under my laptop and my gym clothes. I unlocked the door. As I walked out of the hospital into the cool night air, I felt the weight of the bag on my shoulder. It was heavy. It was the heaviest thing I had ever carried. It was not just paper. It was a bomb. And my grandmother had just given me the detonator. The funeral of Estelle Russell was a masterclass in theater. If there were an Academy Award for bereaved son, Gordon would have won it by a landslide. It rained, because of course it did. The sky over Crestwick was the color of a bruised plum, dumping a relentless, chilling drizzle on the cemetery lawn. I stood at the edge of the gravesite, holding a black umbrella that kept threatening to invert in the wind. I watched my parents. They were standing front and center. Naturally, Gordon was wearing a suit that I knew cost $3,000, holding a handkerchief to his face, his shoulders heaving with practiced sobs. Elaine was clinging to his arm, looking like a tragic widow rather than a daughter-in-law. Her face hidden behind a veil of black netting that was just sheer enough to show her perfectly waterproof mascara. "She was the light of our lives," Gordon choked out when the minister asked if anyone wanted to speak. "A saint, a woman who gave everything to her family." I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked down at the muddy grass. "Gave everything," he said. He didn't know how literal that statement was. He didn't know she had given until she was hollow, until they had scraped the marrow from her bones. I looked around the small crowd. There were neighbors, Mrs. Gable sobbing quietly into a tissue. There were old friends from her gardening club. And there, standing in the back near a weeping willow, was a man in a trench coat, Miles Calder. He wasn't crying. He was watching Gordon. His face was unreadable, but his hands were deep in his pockets, fists clenched tight enough to pull the fabric taut. He caught my eye for a fraction of a second, gave a microscopic nod, and looked away. He knew, I knew, and the red folder, currently locked inside the trunk of my car under a pile of emergency blankets, knew. The moment the service ended, the performance shifted gears. The grief evaporated, replaced instantly by the frantic energy of asset management. We went back to my parents' house for the wake. The air smelled of wet wool and store-bought ham. I stood in the kitchen, nursing a glass of lukewarm water, watching my parents hold court. "It is going to be a lot of work," I heard Gordon telling Uncle Mike, a distant relative who only showed up for weddings and funerals. "The house is in shambles, old pipes, bad wiring. We will probably have to gut it before we can even think of listing it. Honestly, the land value is the only real asset." "We might just auction the contents," Elaine chimed in, popping a deviled egg into her mouth. "It is mostly junk, old furniture, nothing of value. It saves the hassle of an estate sale." I gripped my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. That junk was my childhood. That old furniture was the table where I learned long division. I walked over to them. Are you talking about selling the cottage already? She has been in the ground for 2 hours. Gordon turned to me, his face flushing slightly, not with shame, but with annoyance. Lydia, don't be dramatic. We are being practical. Probate is expensive. We need to liquidate assets to cover the taxes. You wouldn't understand. I am a risk analyst, Dad, I said quietly. I understand liquidity. This is different, Elaine said, patting my arm with a condescending tap, tap, tap. This is family business. It is grown-up stuff. Honey, you just grieve. Let your father and me handle the heavy lifting. You don't know the first thing about probate law. I know enough, I said. Gordon stepped closer, looming over me. It was a move that used to make me shrink when I was 10. Now, it just made me calculate the distance to his jugular. Lydia, drop it. You are upset. We are all upset. But someone has to be the captain of this ship. Now, go say hello to your Aunt Marge. She was asking why you aren't married yet. I didn't go say hello to Aunt Marge. I walked out the back door, got in my car, and drove. I didn't go home. I went to the office of Iris Kincaid. I had found Iris 2 days before Estelle died. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I knew that if I walked into a legal battle with just my anger in a folder, I would get chewed up. I needed a shark. Iris Kincaid was a solo practitioner who operated out of a converted brownstone in the downtown district. Her reviews online were terrifying. One client had written, "She doesn't hold your hand. She holds a knife to the other guy's throat." That was exactly what I needed. Iris was waiting for me. She was a small woman with hair cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob and glasses that looked like architectural drafting tools. Her office was messy, piles of paper everywhere, but when she looked at me, her focus was absolute. "Did you cry?" she asked. That was her greeting. "No," I said, sitting down. "Good. Tears blur the vision." She pushed a stack of papers across her desk. "I ran the request through the specialized channels we discussed. Since you had that signed authorization form from your grandmother dated 3 months ago, the one granting you access to audit historical records, the bank couldn't block it. They grumbled, but they complied." She tapped the stack. "It is all there, Lydia. Every transaction for the last 5 years." I picked up the top sheet. My eyes scanned the columns. I saw the recent Russell Home Solutions transfers, the ones I had already found. But then I looked back further. "My God," I whispered. "It didn't start with the LLC," Iris said, her voice dry and clinical. "Look at the cash withdrawals. 4 years ago, $300 every Friday, then $500, then check payments to cash. They were treating her account like an ATM for years before they got greedy and incorporated a fake business." I turned the page. "The total? Over 6 years." Iris leaned back, linking her fingers behind her head. $142,000, and that is just the liquid cash. That doesn't count the credit cards they opened in her name. I felt sick. $140,000. She was eating generic brand soup to save 50 cents a can, and they were taking this. "It gets worse," Iris said. She pulled a single sheet of paper from a separate file. "I did a property search. There is a lien on the cottage." "A lien?" I stared at her. "The house was paid off in 1990. "Not anymore. Gordon took out a home equity line of credit 18 months ago, forged her signature. Maybe, or maybe he just confused her enough to sign a renovation loan. Either way, there is $75,000 drawn against the equity. The money went straight into a joint account held by Gordon and Elaine." "They mortgaged her death," I said. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. "They spent the inheritance before they even got it." "Exactly," Iris said. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain. "And that is why you cannot say a word. Not yet." "I want to scream at them," I said. "I want to walk into that wake and throw these papers in their faces." "And if you do that," Iris spun around, her eyes flashing behind the lenses. They will claim it was a misunderstanding. They will claim Estelle authorized it all as gifts. They will say the renovation money was for work that is scheduled to start soon. They will lawyer up, hide the rest of the money, and drag this out for 10 years until the estate is bankrupt. She walked back to the desk and leaned over, getting right in my face. This is no longer a family dispute. Lydia, this is grand larceny. This is elder abuse. This is wire fraud. If you warn them, they will destroy the evidence. They will wipe the hard drives. They will shred the files. So what do? You let them feel safe, Iris said. You let them walk into that will reading thinking they are the smartest people in the room. You let them lie on the official record. You let them perjure themselves in front of Miles Calder. Because once they lie to the executor, once they claim the estate is intact, when they know they have hollowed it out, that is when the trap snaps shut. She pointed to the door. Go home. Do not answer their calls. Do not engage. Let them think you are sulking. Let them think you are weak. I left her office feeling like I was carrying a grenade with the pin pulled out. But I had one more stop to make. I drove to the cottage. I needed to see it one last time before the cleanup my father had threatened. I parked down the street so they wouldn't see my car if they drove by. The house was dark. I let myself in with my key. The air was cold and still. I walked through the rooms, the silence pressing against my ears. I went into the bedroom. The bed was stripped. The mattress looked stained and sad without Estelle's quilt. I knelt down by the closet, the floor safe. Estelle had a small floor safe in the back of the closet, under a loose floorboard. It was where she kept her birth certificate, the deed to the house, and her rainy day cash. I pulled back the rug. The floorboard was askew. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lifted the board. The safe was there, but it wasn't dusty. The rest of the closet floor was covered in a thick layer of dust bunnies and lint, but the dial of the safe, it was clean. It shone in the beam of my flashlight, and around the dial, on the metal casing, there was a smear, a greasy, semicircular smear. Someone had tried to open it. Recently, they had probably tried birthdays, anniversaries, social security numbers. They had wiped the sweat or the grease off the dial, but they had missed the smear on the side. I shone the light deeper into the hole. The safe was still locked. They hadn't gotten in. Gordon didn't know the combination was the date his father had proposed, not the date they got married. He never paid attention to the romantic details. I replaced the board and the rug. I went to the kitchen. The trash can was empty. They had taken the garbage out, likely looking for bank statements. But I checked the recycling bin in the pantry. It was full of newspapers and junk mail. I dug through it, near the bottom. Tucked inside a folded grocery store circular, I found a crumbled ball of paper. I smoothed it out on the counter. It was a photocopy of a durable power of attorney form. It was dated 4 days before she died. It was filled out in my mother's handwriting. I recognized the loops in the G and the Y. But the signature line had a scrawl on it. Estelle Russell, but it trailed off. The R was shaky. Then it just became a jagged line that shot off the page. It looked like someone had tried to force a pen into a hand that couldn't hold it, or maybe someone had tried to guide a hand that was pulling away. Next to the signature, there was a smudge of ink, and right next to the smudge, a faint, coffee-stained ring. As if someone had set a mug down in frustration. They had tried to get her to sign it on her deathbed, and she had refused, or she had passed out. This piece of paper wasn't legal. It was trash. But in a courtroom, it was intent. It was proof that they were trying to seize control at the 11th hour. I folded the crumbled paper and put it in my pocket. I drove home. My apartment felt sterile and empty, but it was safe. I double-locked the door. I sat on my couch and stared at the wall for 3 hours. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't look at my phone. I just let the anger crystallize. It was hardening, turning from a hot, volatile liquid into something cold and sharp. At 9 o'clock, my phone pinged. An email. I picked it up. It was from the administrative assistant at Calder and Wren. Subject reading of the last will and testament of Estelle M. Russell. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Russell, This email is to confirm the appointment for the reading of the will on Tuesday, the 14th, at 9 a.m. sharp. Please ensure all beneficiaries are present. CC, Lita Russell. I stared at the screen. Lita Russell. My name is Lydia. 2 I's, no A in the middle, and Russell has 2 L's. My parents had provided the contact list. They had given the email addresses to the law firm. They couldn't even be bothered to spell my name right. Or maybe it was deliberate. Maybe it was a petty, passive-aggressive way of saying, "You don't matter. You are a typo in the grand story of this family." "Lita," I said aloud to the empty room. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. They had misspelled the name of the executioner. I replied to the email. Confirmed. Lydia Russell. I corrected the spelling, but I didn't complain. I didn't call Gordon to scream about the disrespect. I didn't ask why I was CC'd like an afterthought instead of addressed as a primary party. I just closed the laptop. I walked to my closet and pulled out my suit carrier. I checked my charcoal gray blazer. I checked my shoes. Then I reached into the back of the closet, under a stack of sweaters, and pulled out the red folder. I held it in my hands. It felt vibrant, buzzing with potential energy. "Okay, Grandma," I whispered. "Let's go to court." Iris Kincaid did not touch the red folder. She circled it like it was an unexploded ordnance sitting in the center of her cluttered desk. The fluorescent light of her office buzzed overhead, a stark contrast to the gloom of the funeral I had left behind hours earlier. "You are absolutely certain," Iris said, her voice dropping to a register I had never heard her use before, "that your grandmother sealed this herself?" I watched her take it out of the lockbox. I said, "She told me Miles Calder gave her the tape." Iris leaned in, adjusting her glasses to inspect the seal without disturbing it. "That is not just tape, Lydia. That is tamper-evident security banding. It has a serial number embedded in the adhesive. Calder and Wren only use this for Level 1 internal documents, things involving firm liability or significant criminal exposure." She sat back, exhaling a plume of smoke from an invisible cigarette she clearly wished she was smoking. "If Miles Calder gave Estelle this tape," Iris said, "it means he was terrified of what she was writing down. It means he wanted to make sure that if she died, nobody, not even his own junior associates, could peek inside before it got back to him." "So, what do we do?" I asked. "Do we open it?" "Absolutely not," Iris snapped. "The moment you break that seal, you destroy the chain of custody. You turn a legal hand grenade into a pile of hearsay. We leave it sealed, but—" She spun her chair around and pulled a fresh, crisp manila folder from her drawer. She slapped it onto the desk. "We build a backup," she said. "We call this the skeleton folder. The red folder is the nuke, but this is the ammunition to keep you alive until the blast settles. We need to fill this with every single piece of dirty laundry you have found." For the next 3 hours, we worked in a silence broken only by the sound of a hole punch and the rhythmic scratching of Iris's pen. We organized the photos of the torn bank statements. We cataloged the dates of the Russell Home Solutions withdrawals. We printed out the Secretary of State filing that linked my father to the LLC. It was methodical work. It was satisfying work. It was the kind of risk analysis I did for billion-dollar corporations. But this time, the stakes were my own blood. Then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. It was a local area code. I put it on speaker so Iris could hear. "This is Lydia," I said. "Yeah, hi. Is this Lydia Russell?" A man's voice, gruff, impatient, background noise of power tools and a radio playing classic rock. "This is Dave from Miller Contracting. I'm looking for Gordon." I felt a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. "He is unavailable right now. Can I take a message?" "Look, tell him I need the Phase 2 disbursement released by Friday," Dave said. "We already ordered the lumber for the sunroom extension. He said the funds from the mother's account would clear the day after the funeral." My hand froze over my notepad. "The sunroom extension," I repeated, keeping my voice calm. "For the property at 400 Harrow Lane." "Yeah, obviously," Dave snorted. "Where else look? Just tell him if I don't get the check. We are pulling the crew. I don't work on credit." "I will let him know," I said. I hung up. I looked at Iris. Her face had gone hard. "There is no sunroom at Harrow Lane," I said. "There isn't even a contract for one. I checked the house yesterday. Nothing has been measured. Nothing has been staked out." Iris was already typing on her laptop. Miller Contracting. "Miller Contracting, here we go. They are legit. They file permits." She clicked a few times. "Okay. I am looking at the county clerk's recent filings. Gordon Russell didn't just hire a contractor. He applied for a construction loan." "A loan." I felt the room spin slightly. "How the house is in Estelle's name." "It is a secured home improvement loan," Iris read from the screen. "Backed by the equity of the property. The application lists Gordon as the authorized agent with power of attorney. He submitted it 3 weeks ago." I closed my eyes. "He is using the house as collateral to build an extension on the house." "No," Iris said. "He is drawing down the loan cash. The contractor is just the vehicle. Gordon gets the loan approved, pays the contractor a deposit to make it look real, and then where does the rest of the loan money go?" "Into his pocket," I whispered. "He isn't waiting for the inheritance. He is eating the equity while she was still warm." "He is cashing out the house before he even owns it," Iris corrected. "It is actually brilliant, in a purely sociopathic way. If he inherits the house, the debt is his anyway. If he doesn't, well, the estate owes the bank, and he walks away with the cash he skimmed." I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just greed. It was a complete lack of respect for the physical reality of my grandmother's life. Her home wasn't a home to them. It was just a line on a balance sheet they were trying to delete. But then a darker thought hit me. A thought that made my blood turn to ice water. If they were willing to forge documents and leverage a dying woman's house, what else were they leveraging, Iris? I said. "My credit." "What?" "My parents." I said. "They have my social security number. They have all my info. From when I was in college. From when they helped me with financial aid forms." Iris stopped typing. She looked at me. "Check it. Now." I opened my banking app on my phone. I navigated to the credit monitoring tab. I usually checked it once a month, and it was always spotless. A perfect score of 800. I clicked Refresh Report. The little circle spun, and spun, and spun. When the number popped up, I gasped. 640. It had dropped 160 points in 2 months. "Oh my God," I choked out. I scrolled down to the New Accounts section. Store card Best Buy, opened February 14th, balance, $4,000, personal loan, quick cash lending. Opened March 1st, balance, $10,000, credit card. Visa Platinum, opened March 10th, balance, pending. I stared at the screen, the dates, February 14th, Valentine's Day. I had sent them a card and a gift basket. They had opened a credit line in my name to buy what? A new TV. A sound system. They stole my identity, I said. The words tasted like ash. They didn't just ask me to co-sign, they just became me. Iris stood up and walked around the desk. She took the phone from my hand and looked at the screen. "This is not just theft," she said softly. "This is a setup. They are opening the accounts now so that when the estate settles, if there is any dispute, they can say you were in financial trouble. Look at her debt, Judge. Look at how desperate she was. That is why she contested the will." "They are framing me," I said. "They are framing me for being broke so they can look like the responsible ones." "They are trying to discredit you," Iris said. "And they are funding their lifestyle on your future." She handed the phone back to me. Her expression was terrifyingly calm. "Lock it," she ordered. "What?" "Freeze your credit. Right now. Do not dispute the charges yet. If you dispute them, the fraud alert goes out, and Gordon gets a notification because he probably put his email or phone number on the account as a secondary contact. We want them to feel comfortable. We want them to think the tap is still flowing." I tapped the freeze button on all 3 credit bureaus. It was a silent, digital act of war. "Now," Iris said, walking back to her chair. "We script the meeting. I am going to scream at them. I said, my hands shaking. I can't sit in a room with them knowing they are wearing clothes bought with my credit rating. You will sit there, Iris commanded, and you will be a statue. You will be a block of ice, because if you scream, you look like the hysterical daughter. You look like the unstable woman they have been telling everyone you are. She pulled a notepad toward her and uncapped a red marker. Here's the play, she said, drawing a square on the paper. The will reading, Tuesday, 9 a.m. I walk in, I said. You walk in late, Iris corrected. 2 minutes late. Make them wait. Make them sweat. Let them think you might not show up. Let them get comfortable in their arrogance. Okay. You do not bring the skeleton folder, she said. The skeleton folder stays with me. If we need it, I will walk it into the courtroom later. You bring only one thing. She pointed to the red folder on the desk. You bring the bomb. And what do I say? I asked. Nothing, Iris said. That is the hardest part. Lydia, you say absolutely nothing about the fraud. You don't mention the contractor. You don't mention the identity theft. You don't mention the accounts. Why? Because we need Miles Calder to read the will first, she explained. We need the official record to show that Gordon and Elaine sat there and accepted the reading of a will they knew was based on false pretenses. We need them to commit to the lie in front of a witness. And then, Iris grinned, a sharp, predatory baring of teeth. When Calder asks if there are any other matters, you slide the red folder across the table. Just slide it. Just slide it. And you say, Grandma told me to give you this. She said you would know what the seal means. Iris leaned back, tapping the marker against her chin. Miles Calder is a survivor, she said. He built that firm on a reputation of absolute discretion. If he sees that seal, if he sees that his own internal protocol was used by a dead woman to communicate with him from the grave, he will freak out, I said. He won't just freak out, Iris said. He will stop the world, because that seal means the contents aren't just about money. That seal means the contents implicate the firm, or him. She looked me dead in the eye. Listen to me closely. Lydia, when you slide that folder, watch his face. Don't watch your parents. Watch the lawyer. Why? Because, Iris said, if Mr. Calder goes pale, if he drops his pen, if he stops breathing for even a second, it means there is something in that folder that forces him to act. It means your grandmother didn't just leave a will. She left a confession, or an indictment. I looked at the red folder. It sat there, innocent and deadly. They think I am weak, I said. They think I am just the girl who pays the bills. Let them think that, Iris said. By Tuesday morning, they will wish you were only broke, because broke you can fix, indicted you cannot. I stood up. I picked up the red folder. It felt heavier now. It felt like it contained the weight of every stolen dollar, every forged signature, every lie told over a Sunday dinner. I am ready, I said. Get some sleep, Iris advised. And Lydia, yes. Don't answer your phone. Let Dave the contractor call Gordon. Let the pressure build. Let the cracks start to show before you even walk in the room. I walked out into the night. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Crestwick slick and black, reflecting the streetlights like a mirror. I drove home, the red folder on the passenger seat. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the engine and the beating of my own heart. I was done being the investment. I was done being the retirement plan. Tuesday was coming, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the bill coming due. I was the one bringing the invoice. The air in the conference room was so thick with tension you could have cut it with a letter opener. After the initial shock of the red folder landing on the table, Miles Calder had regained a semblance of professional composure. Though his face remained the color of uncooked dough, he had not opened the folder yet. He sat with his hands clasped on top of the blue-bound document the official will like he was trying to physically hold back an earthquake. My parents, however, were recovering their bravado. They were like cockroaches. You could shine a light on them. You could stomp near them. but they just skittered back to their original positions of entitlement. "We are very sorry for the theatrics," Gordon said, smoothing his tie. He turned to the side of the room where my Aunt Marge and Uncle Mike sat. They had been invited as witnesses to the legacy, a move Gordon had insisted on because he wanted an audience for his victory lap. "Lydia has been emotional. We just want to do right by Mother. We just want to follow her wishes to the letter." Elaine nodded, dabbing at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. "It is true. We only want peace. We want to honor Estelle's memory, not turn it into a circus." She looked at me across the table. Her eyes flicked to the red folder, then up to my face, and a small, pitying smile curled her lips. "Honey," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Did you bring your work with you? Bringing a folder to a will reading it looks like you are going to a parent-teacher conference. Are you going to give us a report card?" A few cousins in the back tittered. Gordon chuckled. A low, rumbling sound. "Maybe she has a pie chart to show us. Why Lydia deserves a bonus." They laughed. They actually laughed. They were so sure of the script. They thought the blue document under Calder's hands was a castle, and I was just throwing pebbles at the drawbridge. I said nothing. I kept my hands on my lap. I looked at Miles Calder. "Mr. Calder," I said softly, "please read the will." Calder cleared his throat. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. He looked at Gordon, then at the red folder, then down at the blue document. "Very well," Calder said. "I will read the last will and testament of Estelle Marie Russell, dated October 14th, 2 years ago. This is the document currently on file with the probate court." Gordon leaned back, crossing his arms. "Proceed." Calder opened the blue cover. "I, Estelle Marie Russell, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all prior wills and codicils." He skipped the standard legal boilerplate and got to the distribution section. "Article 3, Calder read, "To my son, Gordon Russell, and his wife, Elaine Russell." Gordon sat up straighter. Elaine squeezed his hand. This was it, the jackpot. "I leave the sum of $5,000 each." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum where all the oxygen had been sucked out. Gordon blinked. "I am sorry. I think I misheard you. Did you say 500,000? $5,000, Calder repeated. His voice was flat. "To be used," and I quote, "for the purchase of a conscience, should one be available on the open market." A gasp rippled through the back of the room. Aunt Marge covered her mouth. "That is a mistake," Gordon said. His voice was rising. "That is a typo. My mother would never write that. We were the primary beneficiaries, the house, the investments." "Article 4, Calder continued, ignoring him. "The entirety of my remaining estate, including the real property at 400 Harrow Lane and all investment accounts, is to be liquidated and placed into the Estelle Russell Charitable Trust, the proceeds of which will benefit the Crestwick Animal Shelter and the Library Fund." "The library?" Elaine shrieked. It wasn't a word. It was a sound frequency that shattered glass. "She left my house to a library." "It was not your house, Mrs. Russell," Calder said, looking over his spectacles. "It was hers." Gordon stood up. He slammed his fist onto the table, making the water pitcher jump. "This is insanity," he roared. "She was senile. She didn't know what she was doing. That document is invalid. We have a power of attorney that supersedes this." "A power of attorney expires upon death, Mr. Russell," Calder said calmly. "Then I contest it," Gordon shouted, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "I contest this will on the grounds of undue influence. Lydia put her up to this. Look at her." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "She poisoned Mother's mind. She has been sneaking around that house, planting lies." "Actually," Calder said. He stopped reading. He closed the blue folder. He looked at the red folder sitting in the middle of the table, the one with the unbroken seal. "The distribution I just read," Calder said, his voice dropping to a hush, "is from the will on file. However," he reached out and placed his hand on the red folder. "Given the arrival of this document," Calder said, and the specific security protocols attached to it. I am afraid the $5,000 mentioned in the previous will is no longer available for distribution." Gordon froze. "What are you talking about?" "You just read it." "I read a document that assumes the estate is intact," Calder said. "But this," he tapped the red folder, "this suggests that the estate has been compromised." "Compromised?" Elaine stammered. "What is in there?" "Open it. I demand you open it." "I will not," Calder said. "Not without a witness." Calder pressed a button on the intercom system built into the table. "Send him in." The side door opened. A man walked in. He was not a lawyer. He was older, wearing a gray suit that looked like it had been ironed with a rock. He carried a briefcase and had the weary, cynical eyes of a man who had seen every variety of human greed. "Who is this?" Gordon demanded. "This is Mr. Eris Thorne," Calder introduced. "He is an independent probate monitor. I took the liberty of calling him the moment I saw the seal on Miss Russell's folder." Mr. Thorne didn't smile. He didn't shake hands. He walked to the end of the table and sat down, opening a notebook. "Why is he here?" Elaine asked, her voice trembling. "We are a respectable family. We don't need a monitor." "Mr. Thorne is here," Calder said, looking directly at my father, "because under the laws of this state, when a specialized internal file, specifically a red seal file, is presented, it triggers an automatic suspension of all estate activities pending an investigation." "Investigation into what?" Gordon spat. "Into her." He pointed at me again. "She is the one with the secret folder. She is the one playing games. She is unstable. Miles. Look at her. She sits there like a stone. That is not normal behavior." "I am sitting here," I said, speaking for the first time since the reading began, "because I am waiting for you to stop lying." Gordon lunged toward me. "You little—" "Sit down, Mr. Thorne barked. His voice was like a whip crack. It stopped Gordon in his tracks. Calder stood up. He picked up the red folder and held it to his chest. "Mr. and Mrs. Russell," Calder said. "I am officially pausing the distribution of the Estelle Russell estate. There will be no checks cut today. There will be no transfer of deeds." "On what grounds?" Gordon sneered. "On the grounds of a red envelope and a crazy daughter." Calder took a deep breath. He looked at the red folder, then at the summary sheet Iris had prepared for me, the skeleton folder, which I had slid across the table right after the red one, almost as an afterthought, but which Calder had glanced at while Gordon was screaming. "On the grounds," Calder said, enunciating every syllable, "of suspected elder financial abuse, fraud, and embezzlement." The words hung in the air. Embezzlement. It was a dirty word, a prison word. Elaine gasped. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "That is slander." "It is only slander if it is not true," Calder said. "I have seen enough in the preliminary summary provided by Miss Russell to warrant a full audit. The red folder, I suspect, contains the rest." Gordon looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The parent-teacher conference joke was gone. In his eyes, I saw the sudden, terrifying realization that he wasn't looking at a daughter anymore. He was looking at a witness for the prosecution. "You did this," he whispered. "You set us up." "I didn't set you up, Dad," I said. "I just kept the receipts." "This meeting is adjourned," Calder announced. "Mr. Thorne will escort you out. I strongly suggest you do not leave town." Gordon looked at the door, then at the folder, then at me. He opened his mouth to speak, to yell, to threaten, but nothing came out. He looked at the extended family in the back of the room. Aunt Marge was staring at him with horror. Uncle Mike was looking at his shoes. The audience he had invited to watch his triumph was now the audience for his ruin. Elaine burst into tears. Real tears this time. Ugly, terrified tears. "Gordon, do something. They can't do this." But Gordon couldn't do anything. The game had moved from the dining room table to the federal statutes. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at Miles Calder. "Thank you, Mr. Calder," I said. "Don't thank me yet," he said grimly, holding the red folder like it was radioactive. "We have a lot of reading to do." I walked past my parents. I could smell my mother's expensive perfume, now mixed with the sour scent of sweat. I walked out of the conference room and into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me, muting the sound of my mother's sobbing. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, just a little, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally, after 30 years, dropping the weight. I had walked in as the girl who owed them everything. I walked out as the woman who owned the truth, and the truth, it turned out, was worth a lot more than $5,000. The parking garage under the Calder and Wren building was a concrete echo chamber, smelling of exhaust fumes and damp tires. I walked quickly, my heels clicking a sharp, lonely rhythm on the gray floor. I clutched my purse against my ribs. I just wanted to get to my car, lock the doors, and scream until my throat bled. But they were waiting. I should have anticipated it. In my risk analysis models, you always account for the volatile recoil the moment a pressurized system blows back after a rupture. My parents were the system, and I had just ruptured them. Gordon stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. He looked massive in the dim fluorescent light, his expensive suit now looking like a costume he had worn too long. Elaine was right behind him, her face a mask of smeared makeup and fury. "Give it to me," Gordon said. His voice wasn't loud. It was a low, vibrating growl. I stopped 10 feet away. I reached into my pocket and gripped my keys, positioning the jagged metal of the car key between my knuckles, a trick Estelle had taught me when I was 16. "It is not with me," I said. "And even if it were, you are not touching it." "You think you are clever." Gordon took a step forward. He looked deranged. The mask of the grieving father had completely dissolved, revealing the desperate, cornered animal underneath. "You think walking in there with a red folder makes you powerful? You are playing a game you don't understand. Lydia, I know the law. I have friends in this town. I can bury you in litigation for 20 years. "You don't have 20 years. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking but my feet planted. "And you certainly don't have the money for a 20-year lawsuit, not unless you find another dying woman to rob." Elaine let out a screech. She rushed forward, grabbing at my arm. "How dare you? We took care of her. We sacrificed everything." I stepped back, dodging her claw-like hand. "You sacrificed nothing. You sold her furniture while she was in a coma." "Give us the folder," Gordon shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "It is family property. It belongs to the estate, and I am the executor." "Not anymore," I said. "Mr. Calder suspended you. Remember?" Gordon lunged. He actually lunged at me, his hand reaching for my bag. "Hey!" The shout came from the elevator bank. A security guard, the same one who had been in the conference room, was jogging toward us, his hand on his radio. Gordon froze. He looked at the guard, then back at me. His eyes were wild, darting back and forth. He straightened his jacket, trying to summon the ghost of his dignity. "This isn't over," he hissed, leaning in so close I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You have declared war on your own blood, Lydia. And you are going to find out that blood stains everything." He grabbed Elaine by the elbow and dragged her toward their car. I watched them go. I didn't move until their taillights disappeared up the ramp. Only then did I get into my car, lock the doors, and let the shaking take over. I thought the worst was over. I thought the battlefield was contained to the lawyer's office and the probate court. I was wrong. The battlefield was everywhere. The next morning, I walked into Redwood Ledger Works at 8:30. I needed the routine. I needed the quiet logic of spreadsheets and data sets to cleanse my brain of the previous day's toxicity. I hadn't even taken off my coat when my desk phone rang. "Lydia," it was the director of human resources. Her voice was tight. "Please come to my office. Bring your badge." Bring your badge. Those 3 words are the corporate equivalent of a death sentence. I walked to the HR suite. My stomach felt like I had swallowed a bag of rocks. When I entered, the director, a woman named Sarah, whom I had known for 5 years, wouldn't meet my eyes. There was a man from legal sitting in the corner. "Lydia, sit down," Sarah said. She pushed a piece of paper across the desk. It was an email. It had been sent to the company's ethics hotline, the CEO, and the entire board of directors. The subject line read, "Internal Fraud Alert Senior Analyst Lydia Russell." "We received a formal complaint this morning," Sarah said, her voice devoid of warmth. "The complaint alleges that you have been using company resources and proprietary software to forge financial documents for personal gain. It also claims you are currently under investigation for embezzlement regarding a family estate." I stared at the paper. The email was anonymous, but the phrasing was unmistakable. It used words like unstable, vindictive, and manipulative. It was Gordon's vocabulary. "This is a lie," I said. "My father sent this. We are in a dispute over my grandmother's will. He is trying to hurt me." "The complaint included attachments," the legal representative said. He didn't look up from his tablet. "Scans of what appear to be modified bank statements with your handwriting on them." "Those are my notes," I protested. "I was tracking his theft. I wasn't forging anything." "Lydia, stop," Sarah said. She looked pained. "You work in risk analysis. You handle sensitive financial data for Fortune 500 clients. We cannot have an analyst with an active allegation of fraud and embezzlement on their record. The liability is too high." "So what?" I felt tears pricking my eyes. Tears of rage, not sorrow. "You are firing me because my father is a liar." "We are placing you on administrative leave with pay," Sarah said. "Pending an internal investigation. We need to audit your work logs to ensure no company assets were used for personal matters." She held out her hand. "Your badge, Lydia, and your laptop." I handed them over. I felt like I was being stripped naked. My job was my sanctuary. It was the one place where I was judged solely on my competence, not my lineage, and Gordon had found a way to poison it. I walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box with my personal mug and a spare sweater. I kept my head down, praying none of my colleagues would ask me where I was going at 10 in the morning on a Wednesday. I got into my car and checked my phone. It had been buzzing incessantly for the last hour. I opened Facebook. My mother had been busy. She had posted a photo. It was an old picture of me as a child, sitting on her lap, looking adoringly at her. The caption read, "My heart is broken today. To sacrifice your whole life for a child, to give them roots and wings, only to have them turn on you in your moment of grief, it is a pain no mother should feel. Please pray for our daughter Lydia. She is lost. She has abandoned her family and is trying to take everything her grandmother worked for. We forgive her, but we will not be silenced." Below the post, the comments were a cesspool. Aunt Marge. I always knew she was cold. Stay strong. Elaine. Cousin Brad. What a snake. After you guys paid for her college, unbelievable. Random neighbor. Money changes people. So sad to see a family destroyed by greed. My phone pinged with a text from Uncle Mike. "You should be ashamed of yourself. Your father is a wreck. Drop the lawsuit or don't bother coming to Christmas." They were controlling the narrative. They were painting me as the villain before the ink was even dry on the court documents. "The loser is always loud," Iris had said. They were screaming from the rooftops. I drove straight to Iris Kincaid's office. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I burst in, dropping my cardboard box on the floor. "They got me suspended. They posted on Facebook. My whole family thinks I'm a monster." Iris didn't look up from her computer. She was typing furiously. "Sit down. Breathe. This is phase 2. This is the smear campaign. It means they are terrified." "I lost my job." "Iris, you are on leave," she corrected. "And once we prove the allegations are false, you will sue for defamation. But right now, we have a bigger problem." She turned the screen toward me. "I put a lock on your credit yesterday, remember?" "Yes." "Well, it is a good thing I did, because at 10:15 this morning, someone tried to access your primary checking account." I froze. "What?" "They called the bank," Iris said. "A woman, claiming to be you. She had your social security number, your mother's maiden name, obviously, and your old address. She tried to change the mailing address on the account to 1242 Maple Street. My parents' house. Why? I whispered. Why would she do that? She requested a rush delivery on a replacement debit card. Iris said. They are tapped out. Lydia. Miles Calder froze the estate. They can't get to Estelle's money anymore. They have burned through the loan from the contractor. They are desperate for cash, and they thought they could dip into your account before you noticed. That is a federal crime, I said. That is wire fraud, identity theft. It is, Iris said. She picked up a file. And this time, we have the recording. The bank records all calls for security. I just got off the phone with their fraud department. They confirmed the caller ID matched your parents' landline. She slammed the file shut. They just handed us the nail for the coffin. What do? We stopped playing defense, Iris said. I have already filed a police report for identity theft. The detectives are interested. They see the pattern, the elder abuse, the forged contractor loan, and now this. It is a spree. My phone buzzed again. An email. It was from Miles Calder. Subject emergency hearing notification. To all parties. Judge Holloway has granted an emergency hearing regarding the temporary stewardship of the Russell estate assets, scheduled for Friday at 1 o'clock. Furthermore, the court has received a counterfiling from Mr. Gordon Russell. A counterfiling. I asked, reading the screen. Iris nodded. I saw it. Gordon is suing you. He is claiming that you stole the cash from Estelle's house. He claims the missing $140,000 was taken by you during your visits, and that the red folder is a fabrication created to cover your tracks. I laughed. It was a hysterical, jagged sound. He is accusing me of his own crime. It is called DARVO, Iris said. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. It is the classic narcissist playbook. He is trying to muddy the waters. He thinks if he throws enough mud, the judge won't be able to tell who is clean. Will it work? In a normal case, maybe, Iris said. If it were just his word against yours, it would drag on for years. She stood up and walked over to the safe in the corner of her office. She spun the dial. But this isn't a normal case, because we have the red folder. We still haven't opened it, I said. We don't need to open it yet, Iris said. The mere existence of it has forced Calder to call the ethics committee, and Gordon's behavior the harassment, the HR call, the identity theft. It is all proving the narrative of the folder without us reading a single page. She looked at me, her eyes fierce behind her glasses. He thinks he is fighting a war of attrition. Iris said. He thinks he can bully you into dropping the folder, but he doesn't realize that every time he attacks you, he is violating the standard restraining orders that kick in during a probate dispute. He is digging his hole deeper. I feel like I'm drowning, Iris, I admitted. My job, my reputation, my family. I know, she said softly. It feels like chaos. But look at the data. Lydia, you are the analyst. Look at the data. I took a breath. I thought about the timeline, the fake loan, the stolen pension, the raid on my credit score, the attempt to steal my debit card, the desperate smear campaign at my work. They are accelerating, I said. Exponentially. Exactly, Iris said. And what happens to an engine that accelerates without oil? It seizes, I said. It explodes. Friday, Iris said. Friday is the hearing. Gordon thinks he is going there to argue about a will. He doesn't know he is walking into a trap he built himself. She handed me a tissue. Go home. Do not look at Facebook. Do not talk to your cousins. Let them scream. Let them post. Let them call your boss. Every scream is evidence. Every lie is a line item on the final bill. I took the tissue. I wiped my eyes. Okay, I said. Let them scream. I drove home. I unplugged my router. I turned off my phone. I sat in the silence of my apartment, a silence that usually terrified me, but now felt like armor. They were loud. They were vicious. They were burning down my world to save themselves. But Iris was right. The louder they got, the more they exposed themselves. They were flailing in quicksand, and every violent motion just sucked them down faster. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Friday, 2 days. I could hold my breath for 2 days. The courtroom of the Honorable Judge Holloway was a study in brown wood and fluorescent silence. It did not smell like justice. It smelled of floor wax and anxious sweat. We were seated on the right side of the aisle. My table was bare, save for the skeleton folder and a single notepad. The table on the left, occupied by my parents and their attorney, a man named Marcus Sterling who wore a tie that was 2 shades too bright for a probate hearing, was a chaotic mess of crumpled tissues and loose papers. Judge Holloway was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of granite. She did not look at the people. She looked at the paper. She adjusted her reading glasses and stared down at the motion filed by my father. "We are here for an emergency hearing regarding the assets of the Estelle Russell estate," she said. Her voice was dry, like leaves scraping over pavement. "And to address the counter-motion filed by Mr. Gordon Russell, alleging theft and undue influence by the respondent, Lydia Russell." Mr. Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a flourish. "Your Honor, we are here because a family is in mourning. My client, a devoted son, has been barred from his duties as executor by a frankly hysterical reaction from the deceased's granddaughter. We have submitted character references from the church, the neighbors, and the family doctor attesting to Gordon and Elaine's selfless devotion to Estelle Russell." He waved a stack of papers. They were letters. Emotional appeals. Stories about how Gordon used to mow the lawn in 1998. They brought feelings to a math fight, Iris whispered to me. She didn't stand up. She didn't wave her arms. She simply slid a binder toward the court clerk. "Your Honor," Iris said, remaining seated until the judge nodded at her. "We are not submitting character references. We are submitting arithmetic." The clerk handed the binder to the judge. Holloway opened it. "Exhibit A," Iris said, her voice cool and detached. "A spreadsheet detailing $142,000 in cash withdrawals over the last 4 years. Exhibit B, a comparative analysis of signatures on checks versus medical consent forms, verified by a forensic handwriting expert. Exhibit C, an affidavit from the branch manager of First National Bank regarding the creation of the account for Russell Home Solutions, LLC. Gordon shifted in his seat. He whispered something angry to his lawyer. Sterling patted his arm and stood up again. "Your Honor, these are just accounting errors. My client was managing a complex household. Older people are forgetful. Estelle often authorized cash withdrawals for miscellaneous expenses. Miscellaneous expenses totaling $30,000 a year?" Judge Holloway asked. She didn't look up. "That is a lot of bingo money. Mr. Sterling?" "The primary issue," Sterling pivoted, "is the LLC. My client created that entity to facilitate necessary repairs to the property. It was a tax strategy." "A tax strategy," the judge repeated. She looked at Elaine. "Mrs. Russell, please take the stand." Elaine looked terrified. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and walked to the witness box. She looked at Gordon for reassurance, but he was staring at the table, his jaw working furiously. "Mrs. Russell," Judge Holloway said, "you are listed as the secretary for Russell Home Solutions. Can you tell the court what specific solutions your company provided to the property at 400 Harrow Lane?" Elaine gripped the railing. "We did maintenance, essential maintenance. Can you be specific?" the judge asked. "The roof," Elaine said quickly. "We fixed the roof. And the plumbing? The pipes were old." Iris stood up. "Your Honor, I refer you to page 12 of our submission. It contains a dated photograph taken by a drone inspection service 3 days ago. The roof at Harrow Lane has moss growth consistent with 10 years of neglect. There are missing shingles. There is no evidence of repair." Elaine faltered. "Well, we paid for the materials. We were waiting for the weather to clear." "And the plumbing?" Iris asked. "We have the water usage records. There was a leak in the guest bathroom for 6 months. It was never fixed. The water bill reflects a continuous waste of 200 gallons a month." "We were planning to fix it," Elaine cried out. "We are good people. Why are you doing this? We just wanted to help her." "You helped yourself to $28,000 in 6 months through that LLC," Iris said, "and not a single contractor was ever hired. The money went from the LLC account directly to a joint account held by you and your husband. We have the wire transfer receipts." Elaine looked at Gordon. "You said you had invoices. You said you made invoices." Gordon closed his eyes. The room went silent. Elaine had just admitted, on the record, that the invoices were a fabrication they had discussed. "Sit down, Mrs. Russell," Judge Holloway said. Her voice had dropped a few degrees in temperature. "Now," the judge turned to Miles Calder, who had been sitting quietly at a separate table, the red folder resting in front of him like a sleeping dragon. "Mr. Calder, you are the custodian of the will. You requested this hearing as well. Why?" Miles Calder stood up. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had realized that his career was hanging by a thread, and that thread was spun by a dead woman. "Your Honor," Calder said, "I am in possession of a sealed document, a Red Seal file, in the parlance of my firm. It was entrusted to me by Estelle Russell 6 months ago, with specific instructions to be opened only upon the commencement of probate distribution, or in the event of a dispute." "And there is a dispute," the judge noted. "Yes," Calder said. "However, the folder came with a notarized cover letter, a conditional clause. I believe it is relevant to Mr. Russell's countermotion." "Read it," the judge ordered. Calder put on his reading glasses. He did not open the folder yet. He picked up a single sheet of paper that had been taped to the outside of the red cardstock. "I, Estelle Marie Russell," Calder read, "being of sound mind, hereby establish the Peace of Mind Protocol. I am aware that my son, Gordon, and his wife, Elaine, may feel entitled to my assets. I am aware that they have been accessing my accounts. I have chosen not to prosecute them during my life because I did not want to spend my final days in a courtroom." Gordon's head snapped up. He looked at the folder as if it were speaking to him. "However," Calder continued, his voice steady, "I have instructed my granddaughter, Lydia, to deliver this file. If this file is in the courtroom, it means 2 things. First, that I am dead, and second, that Gordon and Elaine have not been satisfied with what they have already taken." Calder paused. He looked at the gallery, then back to the paper. "Therefore, I have included a no-contest clause, reinforced by a conditional trust agreement. If Gordon Russell or Elaine Russell contests my will, files any legal action against the estate, or harasses the executor or any other beneficiary, they are immediately and irrevocably disinherited." The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit. "Furthermore," Calder read, "if such a contest occurs, the entirety of the funds previously allocated to them, the $5,000 mentioned in the blue, shall be forfeited. Additionally, the contents of this red folder, which include a detailed ledger of every unauthorized withdrawal they have made since 2019, shall be turned over to the District Attorney's Office for criminal review." Gordon made a noise. It was a strangled, high-pitched gasp. He had filed the motion. He had sued me. He had stood up in this court and demanded control. By doing so, he had pulled the trigger of the gun that Estelle had pointed at his head from the grave. "Mr. Calder," Judge Holloway said, leaning forward, "are you telling me that the deceased anticipated this exact scenario?" "She was very precise, Your Honor," Calder said. "She said, and I recall her words clearly, 'Greed is predictable. They will not be able to help themselves.' Mr. Sterling," the lawyer in the loud tie, looked like he was about to vomit. He looked at Gordon. "You didn't tell me about the withdrawals. You told me it was a misunderstanding." "It was," Gordon stammered. "It is, Your Honor. I want to withdraw my motion." "You want to withdraw?" Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Russell, you have already filed it. You have stood before this court and argued it. You cannot unring a bell, especially when that bell has just alerted me to potential felony embezzlement." "I withdraw," Gordon shouted. standing up. "I dropped the suit against Lydia. I dropped the claim on the house. We just want to go home." "Sit down." Judge Holloway slammed her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. "Mr. Sterling, control your client." Sterling pulled Gordon back into his chair. Gordon was shaking. He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a mixture of hatred and pure, unadulterated terror. "Now," the judge said. "Ms. Kincaid, you had a request." Iris stood up. She didn't look triumphant. She looked professional, deadly. "Yes, Your Honor. While the estate issues are being resolved, we have a more pressing matter. Safety. In the last 48 hours, there have been attempts to access my client's personal bank accounts using a caller ID registered to the defendants. There has been a smear campaign launched at her place of employment, resulting in her suspension. We have filed a police report regarding identity theft." Iris held up the police report number. "We are requesting an immediate, emergency restraining order against Gordon and Elaine Russell, barring them from contacting Lydia Russell, barring them from her place of employment, and barring them from accessing any financial institution where she holds an account." "Objection," Sterling said weakly. "This is prejudicial." "It is protective," Judge Holloway snapped. "Given the testimony regarding the LLC and the admissions made by Mrs. Russell on the stand, I am inclined to agree that the defendants have a loose interpretation of boundaries." She signed a paper on her bench. "Temporary restraining order granted, Mr. and Mrs. Russell. You are to stay 500 feet away from the plaintiff. You are to cease all communication. If you post about her on social media, I will hold you in contempt. If you call her bank, I will revoke your bail before you are even arrested." She looked at Miles Calder. "Mr. Calder, you are to maintain custody of the red folder. I am appointing a forensic accountant to verify the ledger contained within. If the numbers match the bank records, I expect you to forward the file to the prosecutor." "Understood." "Your Honor," Calder said. "Hearing adjourned," Holloway said. She stood up and swept out of the room, her black robe billowing. The bailiff moved toward us. "All rise." We stood. The air in the room had changed. It was no longer heavy. It felt thin, sharp, and dangerous. Gordon and Elaine sat there for a moment, stunned. Sterling was packing his briefcase with frantic speed, clearly trying to figure out how to fire his own clients before the criminal charges landed. I walked toward the exit. I had to pass their table. Gordon stood up. He didn't look at me. He looked straight ahead at the empty judge's bench, but as I passed, he leaned in, just an inch. "You think you won?" he hissed. The sound was barely audible, a snake in the grass. "You lost your parents today. Lydia, you are an orphan now." I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. But Iris did. She stopped. She turned and looked Gordon Russell up and down, like she was inspecting a piece of rotten fruit at the supermarket. "She didn't lose parents, Mr. Russell," Iris said, her voice carrying clearly through the quiet courtroom. "She lost liabilities." Gordon's face turned purple. "This isn't over." "No," Iris agreed. "It isn't. You just lost the civil case. The real winning happens at the final session. When the handcuffs come out." She turned on her heel. "Come on, Lydia. We have work to do." I followed her out the double doors. The hallway was bright. The sun had come out, piercing through the windows at the end of the corridor. I took a breath. It was the first breath I had taken in years that didn't feel taxed. "He is right about one thing," I said to Iris as we walked toward the elevators. "I am an orphan." "You have been an orphan for a long time," Iris said gently. "Today is just the day you stopped paying for the privilege." I nodded. The grief was there, sitting in my chest like a heavy stone, but the fear of the ledger, the fear of the debt, it was gone. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now." Iris pressed the elevator button. "Now we wait for the forensic accountant to confirm what you and I already know, and we watch them try to run." The elevator doors opened. "They won't run," I said. "They don't have anywhere to go. They spent the getaway money on a roof they never fixed." Iris smiled. "Exactly." The discovery phase of a lawsuit is usually boring. It is boxes of paper, hours of scanning, and the tedious hunt for a single mismatched number. But when the defendant is a narcissist who believes he is smarter than the digital footprint he leaves behind, discovery is not boring. It is an autopsy of a lie. We were back in Judge Holloway's courtroom. The atmosphere had shifted from the initial tension of the hearing to the heavy, suffocating dread of a criminal proceedings prequel. The table in front of Gordon and Elaine was piled high with documents that the court had forced them to surrender. Gordon looked terrible. His suit, usually immaculate, was wrinkled at the elbows. He had bags under his eyes that looked like bruises. He kept tapping his pen against the table, a frantic staccato rhythm that betrayed the chaos in his mind. Elaine sat as far away from him as the bench would allow, staring at her hands. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Holloway said, peering over her glasses, "we are still waiting on the metadata for the laptop seized from Mr. Russell's home office. Why the delay?" "Technical difficulties, Your Honor," Sterling said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "My client forgot the password to the encrypted partition." "He forgot the password to the partition labeled Family Business," Holloway asked dryly. "How convenient. Well, lucky for us. The forensic IT team didn't need it. They cracked it this morning." Gordon stopped tapping. "We will get to the laptop in a moment," Iris said, standing up. "First, I would like to call a witness, Mr. Kevin Mills." A young man in a cheap suit walked in. He looked nervous. He was the kind of freelance bookkeeper you hire from a Craigslist ad when you don't want a paper trail. "Mr. Mills," Iris said, "you were hired by Gordon Russell to manage the books for Russell Home Solutions, LLC, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Kevin said, his voice cracking. "And what were your instructions regarding the categorization of expenses?" Kevin looked at Gordon, then quickly looked away. "He told me to put everything under material costs or subcontractor fees, even when there were no receipts. Did you ever question this?" "Once," Kevin said. "I asked him why we were categorizing a $4,000 charge at a luxury cruise line as lumber. He told me that timber prices were up, and I should mind my own business if I wanted to get paid." A murmur went through the courtroom. Elaine closed her eyes. "Thank you. Mr. Mills?" Iris said. She turned to the judge. "The lumber was a Caribbean cruise my parents took last November. While my grandmother was in the ICU, Gordon stood up. That was a business retreat for the company strategy." "Sit down, Mr. Russell," Holloway warned. "Now," Iris said, walking back to our table, "let us talk about the phone records. The court ordered the surrender of all text message history between the defendants for the 6-month period preceding Estelle Russell's death." She picked up a stack of paper. It was thick. "Twist number 1, Iris whispered to me as she passed. "The timeline." She handed a sheet to the bailiff to give to the witness stand. "Mrs. Russell," Iris said to Elaine, "please read the highlighted text message exchange dated December 3rd, at 8:45 in the evening." Elaine stood up. Her hands were shaking so bad the paper rattled. "I can't," she whispered. "Read it," Holloway commanded. Elaine took a breath that sounded like a sob. "Gordon, is she asleep yet? I need to get the checkbook from her purse." "And the reply?" Iris asked. "Elaine, not yet. The nurse is still there. Give it 20 minutes. The morphine will knock her out." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of people realizing they were in the presence of something truly rotten. "Keep reading," Iris pressed. "The next morning, 7 a.m. "Gordon, did you get it?" Elaine read, tears streaming down her face. Elaine, "Yes, only 3 checks left. We need to order more. Make sure you intercept the mailman. Don't let Lydia see the bank statement." Iris took the paper back. "Don't let Lydia see." That is the key phrase. "Your Honor, they weren't protecting Estelle. They were hiding from the auditor." "That is out of context," Gordon shouted. He was desperate now, flailing. "We were trying to protect Lydia. She was stressing Mother out. We were trying to manage the finances so Lydia wouldn't worry." "Is that so?" Miles Calder spoke up from his table. Calder stood up. He opened the red folder. He pulled out a yellow legal pad, the pages brittle with age. "I would like to submit Exhibit D," Calder said. "This is a handwritten log kept by Estelle Russell. She called it her Inventory of Disappearance." He walked to the judge's bench. "Estelle was not as asleep as you thought," Calder said, turning to look at Gordon. November 3rd, quote, "Gordon took the pearl necklace, said he was taking it to be cleaned, never came back." December 12th, quote, "Elaine asked for my debit card to buy groceries. She was gone for 4 hours. Came back with 1 bag of apples and a new coat she left in the car." Calder looked at the text message logs Iris had submitted. "The timestamps match perfectly," Calder said. "You texted about stealing the checks at 8:45. Estelle wrote in her journal at 9:10. They are waiting for me to sleep. I can hear them whispering in the hall. I put the checkbook in my purse, but I marked the register so I will know." Gordon's face went gray. The narrative he had built, the caring son, the confused mother, the jealous daughter, was disintegrating under the weight of simple synchronized data. "She was setting us up," Gordon hissed. He pointed at me. "Lydia put her up to this. Lydia told her what to write. My mother loved me. She would never write that." "Actually," Iris said, "we have proof that Lydia was not even in the state on those dates. She was at a conference in Chicago. Her flight records are in the file." "It doesn't matter." Gordon slammed his hand on the table. "I had power of attorney. I had the right to manage those assets, even if I spent it on a cruise. It was my legal right as the agent." "Not if the power of attorney was obtained through fraud," Judge Holloway said softly. Iris pulled out the final piece of paper. "The detail that kills," she had called it. "Mr. Russell," Iris said, "you claimed earlier that you lost the original deed to the house and had to apply for a certified copy in January, correct?" "Yes," Gordon said. "It was lost. Standard procedure." "And you submitted a request form to the county clerk," Iris said. "Signed by Estelle Russell." "Yes, she signed it." "On January 14th, Iris said. "At 2 p.m. "Yes, that sounds right." Iris projected an image onto the screen in the courtroom. It was a close-up of the signature on the deed request form. It was a smooth, flowing signature. Estelle M. Russell. "This is the signature," Iris said. Then she clicked a button. A second image appeared. It was a medical chart. "And this," Iris said, "is the nursing log from January 14th. At 1:30 p.m., Estelle Russell suffered a minor stroke affecting her right side, her dominant hand. At 2 p.m., she was unable to hold a spoon, let alone sign a legal document with perfect calligraphy." I watched my father. I watched the realization hit him. He hadn't checked the medical records. He had just forged the signature because he needed the deed, and he picked a date at random. "You forged her signature on a government document," Judge Holloway said. Her voice was ice. "To obtain control of a property you then attempted to leverage for a fraudulent loan." "She gave me permission verbally," Gordon stammered. "I was just executing her wishes." "You were executing a theft," the judge corrected. She looked at the bailiff. "This court is now in possession of evidence suggesting multiple felonies: wire fraud, forgery, elder abuse, identity theft." She looked at Elaine. "Mrs. Russell, the court takes a dim view of conspiracies. However, the court also acknowledges when a party is led." Elaine looked up. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. She looked at Gordon. She looked at the text messages on the table. She looked at the prison sentence hanging in the air. And she broke. "He told me it was legal," Elaine sobbed. Her voice was high and thin. "He told me that since we were the heirs, it was our money anyway. He said we were just advancing it." "Elaine, shut up," Gordon roared. "No," Elaine screamed back, standing up and shoving him. He stumbled back, hitting his chair. "I am not going to jail for you. Gordon, you said you talked to a lawyer. You said the LLC was bulletproof. You lied to me." "You spent the money, too," Gordon shouted. "You bought the coat. You wanted the sunroom. Because you told me we could afford it," Elaine wailed. She turned to the judge. "He has another account in the Cayman Islands. He moved $20,000 there last week. It is in his name only." The room gasped. Even Mr. Sterling put his head in his hands. Gordon stared at his wife. The betrayal was absolute. The alliance of greed that had sustained their marriage for 30 years had snapped the moment the handcuffs became a real possibility. "Thank you, Mrs. Russell," Judge Holloway said. "The court clerk will note that allegation regarding the offshore account." She turned to me. "Ms. Russell," the judge said, "it seems your red folder was less of a will and more of a crime scene report." "My grandmother liked to be thorough," I said quietly. "Indeed," Holloway said. "I am issuing a formal referral to the district attorney's office. Mr. Calder, you will transfer all evidence, including the red folder and the text logs, to the criminal division immediately." "Yes, Your Honor," Calder said. He looked relieved. The burden was no longer his. Iris stood up one last time. "Your Honor, given the revelations today, and the breakdown of the defendant's credibility, we move for a summary judgment on the estate distribution. We ask for a final hearing to formally disinherit Gordon and Elaine Russell under the no contest clause and to finalize the transfer of assets to my client." "Granted," Holloway said. "We will reconvene in 3 days for the final decree. Until then, Mr. Russell, Mrs. Russell, do not leave the state. I am having your passports flagged as we speak." She banged the gavel. Gordon collapsed into his chair. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Elaine. He stared at the table, at the mess of papers that had chronicled his ruin. I looked at the red folder sitting on Miles Calder's desk. The seal was broken now. The secrets were out. It looked just like a pile of paper. For months, I had thought of that folder as a weapon. I thought of it as the sword my grandmother had left me to fight a dragon. But as I watched my parents turn on each other, tearing apart their own marriage to save their own skins, I realized it wasn't a weapon. It was an exit sign. It was the key that unlocked the cage of obligation I had been living in since I was 5 years old. "Let's go, Lydia," Iris said, packing up her briefcase. "The air is better outside." I stood up. I walked past my father. He was muttering to himself, something about interest rates and lumber prices, his mind snapping under the pressure of his own collapsed reality. I walked past my mother, who was weeping into her hands, mourning not her mother, but her lifestyle. I walked out of the courtroom. I didn't look back. I didn't need to check the math anymore. The ledger was finally balancing itself. The final session of the Estelle Russell probate hearing took place on a Friday afternoon. The weather outside had cleared, leaving the sky a brilliant, piercing blue. But inside courtroom 4, the atmosphere was as heavy as a funeral shroud. Gordon and Elaine sat at their table. They looked smaller than they had 3 days ago. The arrogance that had inflated them like cheap balloons had been punctured, leaving behind only the saggy, wrinkled reality of 2 people who had gambled their dignity and lost. Gordon was wearing the same suit he had worn on Tuesday, but now the collar was unbuttoned, and his tie hung loose around his neck like a noose he had forgotten to tighten. Elaine was staring at the table, her hands clutching a tissue that had been shredded into white confetti. Judge Holloway entered. We stood. She sat. The movement was efficient, devoid of pomp. She was not here to preside over a debate anymore. She was here to deliver a sentence. "Be seated," she said. She opened the file in front of her. It was thick. It contained the forensic accountant's report, the text message logs, and the final inventory of the red folder. "I have reviewed the findings of the forensic audit," Judge Holloway began. Her voice echoed in the silent room. "And I have reviewed the terms of the last will and testament of Estelle Marie Russell, specifically the conditional clauses attached to the sealed addendum." She looked at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Russell, the court finds that your actions over the last 6 months, specifically the creation of the fraudulent entity, Russell Home Solutions, the unauthorized cash withdrawals, and the attempt to secure a loan against the property constitute a direct violation of your fiduciary duties." Gordon flinched. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mr. Sterling, his lawyer, placed a heavy hand on his forearm to silence him. "Furthermore," the judge continued. Your decision to file a counter motion against the primary beneficiary, Lydia Russell, claiming theft and undue influence, has triggered Article 7 of the will. This is commonly known as a no contest clause or an in terrorem clause. She picked up a piece of paper and read from it. Quote, if any beneficiary under this will contest the validity of this will or any of its provisions, or conspires to challenge the distribution of assets, then all bequests to such beneficiary shall be revoked, and they shall be treated as if they had predeceased me. Elaine let out a small, strangled whimper. This means, Judge Holloway said, lowering the paper, that the $5,000 bequests originally allocated to each of you are null and void. You are effectively disinherited. We know, Gordon muttered. We get nothing. Fine. Just let us go. I am afraid it is not that simple. Mr. Russell, Judge Holloway said. A sharp edge entered her voice. Disinheritance simply means you do not receive a gift. It does not absolve you of your debts. She turned a page in the ledger. The forensic audit confirmed that the total amount of unauthorized funds removed from Estelle Russell's accounts during the final 2 years of her life totals $142,350. This includes the $28,000 diverted to your LLC, the $75,000 drawn from the home equity line of credit, and various cash withdrawals. She looked over her glasses. Under civil law, this is considered unjust enrichment and conversion of assets. You are legally required to pay this money back to the estate. Gordon's head snapped up. Pay it back. We don't have it. We spent it on expenses. Then you will sell your assets to satisfy the judgment, Holloway said coldly. The court is issuing a restitution order in the amount of $142,000, plus legal fees incurred by the estate to uncover this fraud. This judgment will be attached to your personal property, your vehicles, and your own home. You can't take our house, Elaine screamed, jumping up. We have lived there for 30 years. Then perhaps you should not have tried to steal your mother's house, Holloway shot back. Sit down, Mrs. Russell. Elaine collapsed into her chair, sobbing. We are ruined. Gordon, do something. We are ruined. There is one final matter, the judge said. The identity theft. She looked at me. Lydia Russell has provided evidence that credit lines were opened in her name without her consent, and that an attempt was made to access her bank account. This evidence has been forwarded to the district attorney. That is a criminal matter, and it will be handled in a separate trial. Today, however, I am making the temporary restraining order permanent. She signed the document with a flourish. Gordon and Elaine Russell are to have no contact with Lydia Russell. You are not to come within 500 feet of her home or place of business. You are not to contact her by phone, email, or third party. If you violate this order, you will be arrested immediately. Judge Holloway closed the file. The sound was like a book slamming shut on a long, tragic story. The house at 400 Harrow Lane, along with the remaining contents of the trust, is hereby transferred to the sole beneficiary, Lydia Russell. The case is closed. She banged the gavel. All rise. We stood. I felt light. I felt like I was floating. The heavy coat of obligation I had worn since I was a child. The coat that smelled of guilt and unpaid bills had vanished. Iris turned to me and smiled. It was the first genuine, soft smile I had seen on her face. It is done, Lydia. You own the house. You own your name, and they owe you a fortune they can't pay. I don't care about the money, I said. I just care that they can't call me anymore. We gathered our things. I picked up the red folder. It was empty now. The documents filed into evidence, but I kept the folder itself. It felt like a trophy. We walked toward the exit. The bailiff opened the double doors. Gordon and Elaine were standing in the hallway. They were arguing with Mr. Sterling, who looked like he was trying to resign on the spot. When they saw me, they stopped. Gordon looked at me with pure hatred. His face was red, his eyes bulging. He looked like he wanted to hit me, but the presence of the bailiff and the threat of the restraining order held him back. Elaine, however, did not look hateful. She looked terrified, and then, in a split second, She shifted. She engaged the victim protocol. She rushed forward, ignoring her lawyer's outstretched hand. She stopped 5 feet away from me, just outside the strike zone. "Lydia," she pleaded. Her voice cracked. It was the voice she used when she wanted me to co-sign a loan. It was the voice of the martyr. "Lydia, honey, you can't let them do this. You can't let them take our house. We are your parents." I stopped. I looked at her. I saw the tears. But I also saw the calculation behind them. She wasn't crying because she had lost me. She was crying because she had lost her safety net. "We made a mistake," Elaine sobbed, reaching out a hand. "We were desperate, but we are family. You can't leave us with nothing. You have the house now. You have the trust. You can help us. Just pay the restitution. Please, don't abandon your mother." The hallway went quiet. People were watching. Gordon was watching, waiting to see if the guilt trip would work one last time. It was the ultimate test. The button they had installed in my psyche 20 years ago, the good daughter button. I looked at her hand. It was the same hand that had guided mine to sign checks I didn't understand. It was the same hand that had shredded bank statements. I reached into the red folder. I didn't pull out a legal document. I didn't pull out a check. I pulled out a small, yellowed piece of paper. It was torn from a spiral notebook. The ink was shaky, written by a hand that was fighting against pain and tremors. "Grandma wrote this," I said softly. "The night before she died. She told me to give it to you if you asked for forgiveness without offering restitution." Elaine froze. "What is it?" I held the paper up. "You do not owe anyone your peace, not even the people who gave you your name." Elaine stared at the words. She blinked. "That is not a legal document." "No," I said. "It is a receipt." I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. "For 30 years, I said, my voice steady and clear, echoing off the marble walls. "You raised me to be a line of credit. You raised me to be your insurance policy. You made me feel like my existence was a debt I had to repay with obedience and cash." I looked at Gordon. He was glaring at me, but he looked small. He looked like a bad investment that had finally been written off. "I am not your retirement plan," I said. "I am not your safety net, and I am certainly not your bank." I took a step closer, just one step, reclaiming the space they had dominated for 3 decades. "I am a person," I said, "and for the first time in my life, I am a person who doesn't owe you a single cent." "Lydia," Gordon barked. "You ungrateful." Iris stepped in front of me. She was small, but in that moment, she looked like a wall of steel. "Mr. Russell?" Iris said. Her voice was pleasant, but her eyes were lethal. "You are currently speaking to my client in violation of a permanent restraining order. The bailiff is standing right there. Would you like to spend your first night of homelessness in a holding cell?" Gordon snapped his mouth shut. The fight went out of him. He looked at the bailiff, who was unhooking his radio. He looked at Elaine, who was weeping into her hands. He realized, finally, that the ledger was closed. "Come on," Gordon muttered to Elaine. He grabbed her arm, roughly. "Let's go." "Where?" Elaine wailed. "Where are we going?" "Away from her." Gordon spat. They turned and walked down the long hallway toward the exit. They looked gray and diminished. They argued as they walked, their voices rising and falling in a bitter harmony of blame. "Your fault. Your idea. You signed it." I watched them go. I watched until they pushed through the revolving doors and disappeared into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I let it fall. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. It was the final drop of the storm passing. "Are you okay?" Iris asked. I took a deep breath. The air in the hallway smelled of floor wax and coffee, but to me, it smelled like pine shavings and peppermint tea. It smelled like the cottage. It smelled like freedom. "I am," I said. "I really am." "What are you going to do now?" Iris asked. I looked at the red folder tucked under my arm. It was just cardboard and tape. but it had saved my life. "I am going to go to the cottage," I said. "I am going to fix the back step. I am going to plant some tomatoes." I smiled at her. "And then," I said, "I am going to change the locks." I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courthouse and stepped out. The city of Crestwick was noisy and busy, filled with people rushing to appointments and meetings, but I didn't rush. I walked down the stairs, the sun warming my face. I walked past the spot where my parents had parked, now empty. I walked toward my car, my heels clicking a steady, confident rhythm on the pavement. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't walking toward a debt. I was walking toward myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that suffocating house in Harrow Glen to the steps of the courthouse, but I finally found my way out. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below and let me know which part of the story shocked you the most. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this story with more people who need to know that they don't owe anyone their peace.